For so many of us, the Hebrew Bible is a foundational text. But what if I told you that reading it all by itself might actually be a huge mistake? The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, he made this really radical claim. To truly get the written word, you need a key. And that key, he argued, isn't another book. It's the living, breathing, arguing tradition of the Talmud. So let's dive into why he thought that.
But first, we've got to understand the problem Levinas was trying to solve. Think about it. Is a sacred text like the Bible just a historical document? A museum piece, fascinating, but ultimately trapped in the past? Or is it something else, something that's alive, that can still speak to us, challenge us, and even guide us today? That's really the fundamental choice he's putting in front of us.
So on the one hand, you've got what Levinas would call the scientific or philological reading. This approach treats the Bible like any other ancient text, which is great, for historians. But Levinas argued it basically kills the text. It flattens it out, reduces it to just folklore, and completely silences its ability to speak to us right now. But on the other hand, you have the Talmudic reading. This approach doesn't just hear a historical echo. It hears a living voice addressing you personally. For Levinas, this isn't just some alternative reading strategy. It's the only way to unlock the Bible's deep ethical call and make it actually mean something for our lives.
All right, so how does this actually work? Here's our roadmap. We're going to unpack Levinas' idea piece by piece. We'll start with what he called the problem of the closed book. Then we'll see how the Talmud acts as the key. After that, we'll dive into how it sparks a never-ending conversation, why there's so much wisdom in its debates, how it unlocks universal ethics, and finally, how all this transforms the Bible into a text that actually breathes.
Okay, so let's start with the problem that Levinas saw so clearly, the closed book. This is what happens when we treat scripture like a museum piece. It's ancient, it's valuable, but it's sealed behind glass, totally unable to touch our modern lives.
So if the Bible has become this locked room, Levinas gives us the key. And that's our second section, the Talmud as the key. He argues that this huge, sprawling tradition of oral debate and interpretation is the only thing that can actually unlock the written word and let its meaning pour out into our world. And Levinas does not mince words on this point. Just look at this quote. Only someone who is brazen treats the biblical texts as tame enough to be read without tradition. Brazen, that's a strong word. He's basically saying that to read the Bible by yourself, to think you can just pick it up and get it, is an act of incredible arrogance. It's like you're treating this wild, living thing as if it's some tame little pet.
Okay, so let's be super clear about what we're talking about here. The Written Torah, that's the Hebrew Bible itself, the words written on the scroll. The Oral Torah, which we find in texts like the Midrash and the Talmud, is the massive, centuries-long conversation about those words. Now, for Levinas, these two things are not separate. The Oral Torah isn't just some optional commentary. No, it's the essential lens. It's like the operating system you need to even begin to access the Written Torah's true, deep meanings.
And this brings us to the really unique thing about the Talmud itself. It's not a rule book. It's not a book of final answers. It's what Levinas saw as a never-ending conversation. And it's this very process of conversation that keeps the Bible alive. You can really see the process laid out here. It's this incredible layering of dialogue across centuries. It all starts with a single verse from the Bible. Okay, simple enough. Then you get the Mishnah, which gives the first layer of interpretation or ruling on that verse. But, and this is the crucial part, it doesn't stop there. The Gemara then becomes this massive, multi-generational debate about that first interpretation. This is exactly why Levinas called it a hermeneutics of the hermeneutics. It's an interpretation of an interpretation, a conversation that is always, always digging deeper.
And here's the part that might be toughest for our modern minds to grasp. The goal is not to find one single correct answer. The whole point of the Talmudic method is to constantly seek the unsaid hidden within the said. The rabbis believed that the biblical text held an infinite surplus of meaning. Their job wasn't to pin it down and lock it in a box, but to keep drawing more and more of that meaning out, making sure the divine word stayed alive and relevant for every single generation.
Now, this method of endless interpretation leads to another really radical idea, especially for us today. And it's that meaning isn't something you find alone in your office. This is our fourth section, the wisdom of debate. It's the idea that true understanding can only be found in community. In the Talmudic world, reading is just not a private, solitary thing. It's fundamentally communal. It happens in the loud, chaotic, beautiful environment of the yeshiva. And here, meaning isn't just gently discovered. Oh no, it is forged in the fire of debate, through fierce objections and what they literally call wars of the Torah. There's even this profound warning, woe to the solitary thinker, because in this tradition, truth is something that's only ever revealed in that space between people arguing. And this commitment to communal debate leads to one of the most astonishing principles in all of religious thought. So you have two rabbis locked in a fierce, totally contradictory debate. The Talmud doesn't pick a winner. Instead, it makes this profound declaration. These and those alike are the words of the living God. Just think about how radical that is. It suggests that the divine truth is so vast, so immense, that it can actually contain and sustain multiple, even opposing human perspectives, all at the same time.
So you might be asking, okay, what is the point of all this intense, multi-generational arguing? It's not just intellectual gymnastics. The whole purpose, as we're about to see, is to unlock universal ethics, to move from a particular law written for a specific people in an ancient text to a universal call that speaks to all of humanity. And this is a perfect example. Take the famous biblical verse, an eye for an eye. If you read that literally, it sounds like a command for brutal physical revenge. But the rabbis of the Talmud completely transform it. They ask, what is the spirit of this law? What's its ethical goal? And they conclude it has to be about justice, not vengeance. So an eye for an eye becomes the basis for monetary compensation. It becomes a civil matter, not a criminal one. And its purpose shifts entirely, from perpetuating a cycle of violence to stopping that cycle and re-educating the person who did wrong. That's the Talmudic genius right there, pulling a universal ethic of justice out of a particular law.
Levinas's own mysterious teacher, a man known to history only as Monsieur Shoshani, he put it perfectly. He said, the Bible is particular to Israel. The Talmud is its clear thought on a universal plane. What an incredible line. In other words, the Talmud is the philosophical engine that takes the specific stories and laws of one people and translates them into profound ethical wisdom for everyone.
All right, so let's bring this all home. When you combine this method of endless communal debate with this ultimate goal of finding universal ethics, what happens to the Bible itself? Well, according to Levinas, it becomes the text that breathes. It stops being an object from the past and becomes a living subject right here in the present. So what Levinas ultimately shows us is that the Talmud completely changes the nature of the Bible. It's no longer a static object. It becomes a living subject, a book that, and I love this phrase, contains more than it contains. What that means is it's not just a record of a revelation that happened once, a long, long time ago. It is an ongoing event of revelation, a voice that is actively calling out to us, demanding our responsible interpretation to help bring its infinite meaning to life, right here, right now. And this leaves us with one final, pretty profound question. If Levinas is right, if a text isn't just something we analyze, but something that actually addresses us, that places a demand on us, then what does it truly mean to be called to responsibility by a book?